Hi Dominic, lovely to meet up with you and begin doing some work on your game. Just a quick note to reiterate what we discussed towards the end of your session. This is an ongoing process. The way in which you practice is very important rather than the number of balls you hit, and applying some consistent effort to some key and particular areas of your game will stand you in much better stead rather than flitting from one fix to the next, reacting to every golf ball you hit, etc. So, an ongoing process. We looked at three key areas. We discussed the movement of the hips during the backswing. You were talking about the feel of the hips swaying off the golf ball as demonstrated on the left-hand image here. The yellow dot is your starting position, the centre of the pelvis at P1, and the red dot with the arrow is the end position, or almost the end position, on the right hand footage, which I'm going to come to shortly. The big difference here we talked about was, first of all, at setup we had you turn both feet out, which repositions the knees, allowing the hips to turn more freely. You can see that there's a considerable increase in the amount of hip turn that we've got established here on the right hand image. So the hips are turning more freely, allowing for a greater amount of travel in the shoulders, and also proving adding stability to the pelvis during the backswing. The reason the hips or the pelvis haven't moved off is because the flex, rather than being maintained, which restricts the turning of the hips and forces you onto the outer edge of this right foot, the right leg here has started to straighten. The left knee has flexed in response to that. The hips are now turning much more freely on a tilted angle, allowing everything to stay or maintain its stability during the backswing. One thing we do notice here is as you continue your swing, there's a little bit of flex goes back into the right knee, and you can see as you do that, the hips start to just sway off a little bit upon completion. This is quite early in your session. There's a little bit of flex goes in, and as that flex goes in, you can see the hip girdle just starts to move away from the target a little bit. So flow the feet out more, put more weight forward, and allow the right leg to straighten during the backswing. So that was the first thing that we discussed. We then talked about two key areas. One was improving your low point, which was relating to the position the club was in at P6. So we're talking about the release point being too far back, the weight or the hips not being far enough forward. As we can see here, the left knee only ever gets over the left ankle, never gets out in front of it. And then from there, we start to overtake too quickly. The radius of the swing expands, and the low point is moving back, or it's too far back. As you then come through the ball, in an attempt to prevent the club digging in the ground too much, the handle of the club raises quickly. Just put a line on the butt of the club there. The handle of the club raises very quickly as the lead wrist and the lead arm flex. And that's just a mechanism of bringing the club out of its descent. That also makes it difficult for you to attack the ball from the inside, as we'll come to when we look at the down the line footage. So this was linked to the second part of the session, which resulted in improving the path into the golf ball. So the first thing we did was we had you working some little swings, or making some little swings where we're presetting the impact position. We're pushing the hips forward, pushing the handle forward, and we're just making some little swings, isolating impact, trying to maintain that shaft lean through the hit. And the goal here was to keep the club head beneath the level of the hands for as long as possible. You can see that as the weight goes forward, and the handle goes forward. Remember, controlling low point is not just about putting the weight forward. The handle location plays a key part or key role in this as well. So we've got the weight forward and the handle forward. You can see there, we talked about before, the lead knee now more out in front of the lead ankle. The shaft leaning considerably further forward. And as we come through the ball now, the arms stay straighter. And the raising of the handle is at a more gradual rate. Because now we've no need to bring the club out of its descent as quickly, because the low point is much more in front of the golf ball. And we talked about how improving this long term means that you've got to spend more time with the weight forward at impact, with the handle leaning forward at impact, which in turn will remove the need to divide the elbows and raise the butt of the club rapidly through the hip. So just go back to P6 and take a little look at where you were towards the end of your session. At this point, we've also worked on attacking the ball from the inside a little bit more. We've changed the way in which you take the club back. I'm just going to go to the top of the backswing and start down. We'll be touching on that shortly. Coming into the golf ball now, we've got the release point, so the butt of the club at P6, much further forward. We've maintained the angle in the wrist much better, with no gap here between the right arm and the right side, which we had visible at the start of the session. Both centres, both measurable centres, centre of the shoulder turn, centre of the hips further forward. Left knee out in front of the left ankle. Radius of the swing now is nice and tight. We're going to come in with much more shaft lean, much flatter left wrist. And then as we come through the hit, rather than raising the butt of the club dramatically, we're starting to straighten out the arms, lengthen the arc. We still need to do a little bit of work on the lower body and the way we push up out of the ground. However, as discussed, that will come in time. That will start to change anyway, based on a completely different P6. So if we keep arriving in the P6 that we see here, where the butt of the club is much nearer the middle of the right thigh, the left knee is more out in front of the left ankle, the radius of the swing is tighter, we will start to use the ground differently through the hit. That sort of thing can be worked on, obviously, but sometimes starts to evolve. The most pertinent piece at the moment was to tighten up P6 and to just tweak that setup a little bit. So that's when viewed from face on. When we looked at the swing from down the line at the start of the session versus the end of the session, what we noticed was, as we got to the top of the backswing, there was quite a severe, pretty good takeaway, little bit of rolling of the club face, which we discussed. But from P2 to P4, there was a lot of cupping of the wrist. You can see there that the left wrist is very cupped. As the left wrist becomes cupped, the club face opens up. That condition is then maintained. And any time the lead wrist cups or extends, then the club starts to open up to the arc of the swing and move out towards the golf ball too much. And we talked about the benefits of flattening out the left wrist at this point. So if we've got the left arm, let's clear that one, sorry. If we had a situation where, rather than the left arm and the left wrist being in this position, if we could have a more bowed left wrist or a flatter left wrist, we talked about the idea of Dustin Johnson adding a little bit of what he demonstrates, then what would happen is the shaft of the club would also be changed it would be pushed inwards more, and the toe of the club would be much squarer, or the face of the club would be much squarer to the arc of the swing. And we discussed that there's ways of doing that, various ways of doing that, but first of all what we need to do is become familiar with it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to preset that bowled left wrist. And this is a drill that allows us to police the amount at which, or the rate at which, that left wrist flexes during the backswing and the early part of the downswing. So we've got the left wrist very bowed. We're trying to maintain that to the top. You can see now that the left wrist, as we get to the top, we stop these two swings both at the same time. When the right arm, or when the left arm hits the right shoulder, you can see here that we've got a very cupped relationship between left arm and left wrist, whereas here we've got a much flatter relationship between the two. The old swing, that cupped position would be maintained coming into impact. And the goal now is to just maintain this new condition where the lead wrist is flatter, resulting in a club now that is less from the outside and less open to the arc of the swing. If we play these two swings on together, you can see that the trajectory of the sweet spot into the golf ball has been changed dramatically. You can see on the left where the occasional shank is coming from. There's not a massive difference in the amount the arms are in. There's not a huge difference in the way the body is working at this point. We've just got a much flatter left wrist. The shaft is shallower at P5. The shaft starts to get onto the forearm at P5.5. The sweet spot is in behind the hands at P6. The club is approaching the golf ball much more from the inside. The towel on the mat there is just to help tighten the radius, give you some feedback if you start to flex the wrist too much. The club head cover is there just to, again, discourage the move that you see on the left and just make it easier for you to focus on improving that wrist condition throughout the backswing and downswing. Coming through the ball, there's still a tendency to want to do some funny things that you've done in the past that you don't need to do anymore. We saw when you really got into the process during your session, you started to see some marked improvements in the outcomes of your shots. At this stage, it's more about focusing on the movement, worrying less about the outcome. Keep isolating the movements. Keep understanding the positions much more clearly. And the more you do that, the more familiar you get with the moves, the better the outcome of the shot will be. You can see there the difference in the position of the sweet spot at the two impacts. One we're making centered contact, the other we're making a severe heel contact. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me. I've Dropboxed you the DVDs, so hopefully we can start watching those and again, accelerating your understanding of the system. Look forward to doing some online work with you through the winter months, and really look forward to getting together in spring to do another day at the studio and take your game to the next level. Well done.